Back again. I want to share a video with you. You can see it in the comments, the description, etc., down below about the restoring a desert. But I'm tying it in with a couple of different things, so sort of hang with me here for a minute or two, and then go and look at the video. Um, the name of the video is "They Restored a Desert Without Planting a Single Tree," and it's a fascinating story. It's about Ethiopia, and the long and short of it is that you may remember, I remember years ago when they were having the terrible famines in Ethiopia, and we were, raising money to help people in Ethiopia, etc., because their landscape was just barren. And the reason it was barren is because of overpopulation you know, it's not just overpopulation. It's the way the population used the landscape. So they were out there cutting down everything for firewood or whatever else. They were letting their goats overgraze. Now this happened. I remember reading about Ephesus. Ephesus. If you go and look at where the historical Ephesus is, it's like a mile or two inland. Anyway, it's a good bit inland from where the sea is. It was a seaport, but they overgrazed there, and the hills washed away and into the bay. But anyway, so this kind of thing has been happening. Populations have been doing this for centuries. And what was found out, this guy came along, and you can watch the video, get into more detail about it, but he came along and he noticed that he saw these stems growing out of the ground, like a small shrub might be coming up or whatnot, and he went and inspected it, and lo and behold, it wasn't a new plant that was growing from seed. This was a stump of a bush. And what he concluded was, we need to stop you, or the Ethiopians needed to stop overgrazing, essentially. They needed to let their land rest. Now, this is something that is, coming from a Judeo-Christian background. We've heard about, you read about resting the land, resting the land. And of course, farmers here in the United States, they know to rest the land. You don't just, and ranchers, they moving their cattle from pasture to pasture to pasture. Well, that's not what was going on in Ethiopia. And so what just looked like desert, because there was hardly anything there, what he did is he urged the officials there, what you need to do is stop grazing and using the land. Of course, there was nothing as far as firewood. There wasn't anything big enough to use as firewood. So by this point, they'd already taken care of all the firewood removal, and it was basically a continuation of this a desert-like situation because of the overgrazing by the goats, etc. So they fenced off areas, and lo and behold, the thing came back alive. All of these stumps that were out there, which the goats would come along and eat the new green shoots that were coming off whenever there was a new green one, well, they left it alone, and it turns into, these small trees, etc. And then you had, other kind of flowering plants, etc. Grasses, flowers, herbaceous plants. And then you had, along come the insects to take care of the pollination, etc. And then as time went on, because these plants were there and started holding moisture in the ground, because before there was the moisture would just go into the ground and just go right on through. The ground started holding moisture. And they found that these springs, there were like about a dozen springs that people had a memory of. The parents, grandparents, they knew, when we were kids, we played in those springs. These things had all dried up. But the groundwater table rose back up, and the springs were reactivated. This is just amazing. And they did this by stopping grazing by the goats. They fenced off areas, and then what they would do is they would harvest some plants from this area and feed the agricultural animals. Okay, now, so take a look at that. This whole it's just a wonderful story, and it's something that, maybe if we think outside the box like this, there may be other solutions that people are ignoring, and I'm going to get to one right now. Uh, there's three videos I watched in just the last couple of days, and they are related in how do we maintain our environment. Uh, Many of y'all may know me from, or know that I've been involved in sustainability issues for quite a while. I think that they've been usurped by political interest, but my concern for taking care of creation is something that I've been doing for quite a while. Anyway, this second video that I watched was about Pine Valley, California. And Pine Valley, California is one of these areas in California that has been battling wildfires for decades. And of course, as we know, whenever with wildlands and whatnot, we got away from controlled burning there for decades throughout all over the western United States, all over the place. And so the vegetation would die. You'd get a lot of fuel building up, okay? And this is the problem. So, and they at some point, I think that they started trying to do controlled burns, but some of their controlled burns got away from them. You might look it up, Pine Valley, California. Uh, and they tried other kind of suppressing plant growth, all these other kind of things. So, and this is a sort of a steep terrain around. It was a valley kind of had a lot of steep terrain and stuff like that. So you ended up having all this fuel build up, and every few years they'd have a major fire that just would race through, as so many of these California fires do. They get out of hand because there's so much fuel there. And then you have the Santa Ana winds, etc., whatever wind the circumstances are. It gets out of hand, and it gets away from the fire department. When the wind breaks or the fire breaks don't function well enough with the wind, etc. Finally, just a few years ago, somebody came up with a suggestion: why don't we put goats on it? Now, this is not a new idea to me. It's been a couple of decades ago, I think, at least a decade, but I think a couple by now. The first time I heard of goats being used for similar purposes was they put them on a cemetery, a historical cemetery, which was getting overgrown. It's hard for the community to take care of. Of course, historical cemeteries, that means you don't have an active cemetery company maintaining it or anything. So the cemetery is getting overgrown, and they put goats out on it, and the goats take care of the vegetation. So anyway, that's what they did here in Pine Valley, California. Voila! They're not having the problem. Fire is not a problem. Why? Because they're keeping the vegetation down. It's a great idea. Goats should be used for all manner of places around the United States where we've got too much vegetation, where there's a fire issue or whatnot, where we're not letting, here in Florida, one of the things that historically would happen is you'd have wildfires that would just go across the prairies here in the state and burn off all kind of vegetation. Another thing, you'd have like sea grapes. Sea grapes along along the coast. Well, you might drive along the coast and say, "Oh, look at the sea grapes. This is the way they've always grown." And in reality, they hadn't always grown that way along these dunes. Fire would have burnt these sea grapes back, and we wouldn't have these sea grape forests in Florida, which we tend to have. And now they have to battle the sea grapes. So, anyway. And I'm not saying that the goats are the answer for every issue, but that goats were the answer for Pine Valley, California. In Ethiopia, the goats were the problem. But the thing is it's management that matters. I mean, after all, the goats are being used by humans. I mean, if we just let the goats go, they go wherever they go to new vegetation 1,000 miles away eating, right? They wouldn't hang around your neighborhood or on your farm, right? So now this reminds me of one other item, and that is there's a video that just came out the other day about Lahaina, Maui. Remember the fire last summer that swept through and just wiped out the historic section of that town there? And this guy he's a realtor there on the island, and I've seen him do multiple videos concerning what happened there. But one of the things that he's pointing out in this most recent video is that here are, in the area where this fire supposedly started, before it swept across the landscape and into the community, the area there it's a big grass. It's acres and acres of grasses. And his comment is, hey, why aren't they watering the grass to keep it green? Or why aren't they cutting the grass or burning the grass? Why aren't they doing these things? Well, guess what? My question is, why aren't they putting goats on that grass? This would be an excellent place that in Pine Valley, California. These goats, they could climb all over the hills. They're so sure-footed that they could get in all kind of places that would be difficult for what we want to do. Humans want to do. We want to get a bush hog tractor and go out there and zip up and down the landscape and cut it and get our money and go home, right? It takes a lot more whenever you've got rough terrain. So both in Pine Valley, California, in Lahaina, Maui, whatever I may be saying the town wrong, but on Maui, why don't they do that? Put goats out there, eat that grass. Anyway, these are just some ideas about how to think out of the box, how to take care, how to manage our environment in ways that are pretty simple. And it was interesting with the Pine Valley video that you can go and look it up yourself. But they talked about how once this started working, then all kind of people started getting interested in raising goats, and they started having people make and eat goat cheese and all these other goat products. So there's a lot of things that we could do that are more natural than what we do. We solve all our problems with these technologies, and that may be the end of us in the end. But if we stop and think and see what the world, the earth has to offer naturally, then I think we might be able to take care of all the problems that we have. And this is just one of them. Anyway, I wanted to share this. Take a look at what's down below and look at that video. They restored a desert without planting a single tree. It's put out by, what was it? I can't remember who put it out. But anyway, that's the name of the video. It might be hard to find it. I had a hard time finding it until I put the actual organization that put it out into the search. But maybe you can find it. Anyway, you don't have to look at. All you have to do is go down below, and there's the link. Have a good day.